of digital transformation for businesses, especially in particular in the construction industry. So to start with, just let's go through some basics. Whenever I talk about capital construction project, I'm looking into the complete project life cycle, starting from the very early stage where a project being initiated, all the way until the project is completed and ready for operation. Now, during this project life cycle stages, if we go in detail, it consists of many business processes that are interrelated with each other. And usually each stage is governed by what we call a stage gate, where actually deliverables need to be completed before we can analyze and decide whether to exit the stage and start the next stage if we have all the approvals in place. Now, to manage this project life cycle, we are all familiar to what we call the responsibility assignment matrix, which I believe one of the very important documents that should be in every single project management plan. In a nutshell, the responsibility assignment matrix helps us to understand how the project will be executed. So on the left-hand side, it will list all the business processes that need to be delivered, while on top, it shows all those entities as well as project team members who will have a role in managing those business processes. And they can be playing a role by performing the task, approving it, reviewing it, sharing it, among others. Now, in the construction project, what makes this even more complicated than any other industry is that it is a common requirement almost on every construction project to involve multiple entities, sometimes with conflicting interests, to manage the delivery of those projects. So whether it's the project owner, the consultant, the PMC, the contractor, subcontractors, they all have a role in delivering the project. Now, from a project management perspective, what we have been doing for decades is that to be able to perform our business processes, we use what we call it templates. And I'm sure if you look into any capital construction project, there are templates. Some organizations tend to standardize their templates. Others might create templates for every single project. But the whole idea about a template, it helps to improve the communication between the different entities involved in the project. It will also help in capturing the right data or the data needed for each business process, and later on ensure that all those who are involved in the review and approval are their signatures or their names are included in those processes. Now, for each one of those templates, and those are many, I mean, I did once a count, you might find on a project more than 100 plus, maybe 200 business processes that need to manage. So for each one of those business processes, you'll have templates that need to be used. Now, for each one of those business process templates, there's a workflow, and the workflow, which is aligned with the responsibility assignment matrix, it explains who will be submitting or initiating the business process, who will be involved in reviewing it, providing input, need to be informed, and those who will be reviewing and approving it or rejecting. Now, in doing those processes, there are what we call them delegation of authority rules or approval authority levels, which sets the authorities for the project team members on what authority has been given to them to approve or act on certain processes. Those could be driven by the category or tab of a record. Those could be by the value of the record, among others. And delegation of authority is becoming quite critical because violating delegation of authority is the same as committing fraud, because then you'll be performing tasks that you are not authorized to perform. For each one of those business processes, then we have what we call registers or tables or logs to keep track of all these transactions for each business process, which will become the basis for generating dashboards that aggregate all this information. So what I've showed you until this point is what usually we would have in a project management plan, where we document all this data all these templates, workflows, responsibilities, reports, dashboards, and we share with the project team to be implemented. Now, being involved in the industry, and I'm not talking about our Gulf region, but I'm talking even global, believe it or not, 80%, if not more, of the construction industry still perform those business processes in a either manual or a semi-manual process. And this is completely unacceptable when we are trying to promote lean construction management, when we are trying to promote accountability, transparency, real-time reporting, all the best practices that every industry has adopted. We cannot afford that the construction industry stay behind. And staying behind is causing really a lot of issues for the industry. Those are some of the issues that are faced by the capital construction project. The first of those, that because we end using tools like Excel or manual, etc., we end having hundreds of data silos with different data, different information, don't talk to each other. So when it comes to executive stakeholders, they cannot really understand what's going on. Okay, it's simply so much silos of information, so many silos of data that don't talk to each other. By not having access to this data in real time, by the time you become aware of an issue, it's already too late. Whatever decision you might undertake, it will have very little value on changing what already has happened. And the famous statement, trash in, trash out, also applies to all our business processes. You know, if the data captured in those processes are not right, are incomplete, wrong, whatever, then again, you are taking the wrong decisions based on the wrong data being shared with you. And this is maybe one of the major nightmares on project, and that is nobody wants to be held accountable. Because today, when you do processes in a manual or semi-manual, you escape accountability, and nobody will take accountability for whatever action's been taken. Also, there's the high risk of data manipulation, which could be intended for committing fraud, for manipulating information. And again, the construction industry, regretfully, is known to have that type of issues continue to occur. And again, we have to admit, being manual or semi-manual in performing those processes, you're not being lean. There's so much effort being wasted in duplicate data entry, on communicating information, checking information, compiling data, aggregating data, sharing data with other project team members. So much time is wasted in transporting this information from one point to the other. And again, by not having the right technology to manage this data, you have no chance to alert for any deviations or any fraudulent actions that could be happening on your project. And with many countries, including like Saudi Arabia, where today there's a major drive against fraud, against wrong actions, you know, this is completely unacceptable to continue to do things manual or semi-manual. Again, one of the functions or one of the features of project that we end having huge volume of documents. If those documents are not well structured, not well organized, it's become a nightmare to locate your document, to understand which version you are dealing with and who has reviewed this document, among all others. And then we come to the point of stakeholders who are keen in having a single version of truth, to know what's happening with their project, where data come to them in a manipulative format. So whenever they want to report it to senior management, they have major concerns about the quality of data and the ability of data being reported to them. And the only way to overcoming by building trust among your team to ensure that the data is coming from the bottom, from the transaction level, all the way to the stakeholders, regardless of their role, without being manipulated. And again, we need to look into creating, making this data like standardized, so we can either come ISO certified or try to improve our operations among. And the last thing, or the final item, is that today we hear the statement that data is the new oil, and it's true. Today, you'll find that in all organizations, data become a quite important factor in their decision-making, in their analysis, and you can see what's happening with all the business globally. It's all driven by data and who has the right data and the true data. So with all this in mind, okay, it makes quite critical that we need to digitalize project management business processes. And just to avoid, for some to assume that maybe I've misspelled the word digitalizing, and I should have been saying digitizing. Well, there's two words, okay? There's two different things. There's digitizing and there's digitalizing. You see, digitizing is what we've been doing always, and that is have template using Excels or forms where we are digitizing our processes, our form. But digitalizing is when you start adding workflows to those processes. So how we can digitalize our business, our project management business processes? Well, the approach is quite simple. First, we must have templates. And I'm sure for all of you, you have been using templates, whether done in Excel, done in any other application. But the important that those templates are so important, because when you create the right template for every single process, not only you are capturing the right data, but also you're ensuring the link with other important information. So for example, we know that in the construction industry, it's very important to recognize what we call the work breakdown structure. So I might find that having a WBS level to my template is important. Sometimes you might have schedule sensitive processes like RFIs or submittals, which mean that I need to have the activity ID, which is imported from my schedule as part of the process, and so on. So creating the template is quite important. And when you create a template, you have also think about who should access the template and what fields they can access. And it's quite needed to ensure integrity of the information that will be captured using those templates. Second, for each template, if you remember, those are aligned with my responsibility assigned matrix. So you have to think about the workflow that will be used to submit, review, and approve those templates. And sometimes the workflow need to consider conditions. Maybe if I'm submitting a change order, if the change order value is more than 50,000 riyal, then I'm not authorized to review it. It needs to be escalated to someone else. And if it goes more than 100,000 riyal, then it must be reviewed by another individual, and so on. Sometimes if an RFI is for mechanical works, it needs to go for the mechanical team to respond to it, not for the structural team. So building all these conditions and branches in your workflow will help not only to automate the execution of the business process, but also ensure that the approval authority levels are embedded, and of course, ensure that accountability is enabled. Something very common to any business process in the construction industry, and that is there are attachments, whether those drawings, pictures, etc. So we need to be able to attach all supportive documents to every single template. And again, we need to ensure that when we do this item, that data security is respected. I cannot simply say anyone can access my system, anyone can access the form, anyone can do that. So having the right authorities, the right access right, permission rights to all those who will be involved is quite important. And again, today, and especially, and this really became quite a fact after the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a fact now, assuming that your project team will be located at the same place, this has become now a myth. Your project team could be at different locations, at different parts. So if you want to manage a project, you must have that culture embedded and ensure that your team can collaborate and can communicate from any place, anywhere, anytime. So with this in mind, let's look into samples of some input templates that you might consider for your projects. So we might have the template for safety instance, which is something very common on our project, or meeting minutes. So the first one is meeting minutes, and those could be for progress review, kickoff meeting, pre-bid meeting, closeout meeting, safety meeting, quality review meeting. So meeting minutes is quite important. because it captures all the information discussed in that meeting. The project budget and the budget spending plan is another important template. Work inspection request. And whenever I say work inspection request, see, we need to start aligning our WRs with these specifications. You see, you cannot have a generic WR for your project. Every work inspection request should be mapping the specification requirement. So whenever your team are doing the inspection, is being done in alignment with your specification, what's been written in the contract. Non-compliance reports, another important template. And again, like what I've done in this non-compliance template, I put reasons for NCRs. And the reason I put that to eliminate subjective NCRs. So actually, whoever's issuing the NCR, there's a reasons that are approved by the contract or stem from the contract why NCR can be issued, and you must select the reason for issuing an NCR. Again, you need to have templates, maybe in different languages, multiple languages. Again, we are working in a country where the formal language is Arabic. So although project communication tend to be in English, but there are some business processes that might require to be bilingual, or maybe completely in Arabic language for working with government agencies, among others. Another type of template that maybe we don't think a lot of it is what we call it contractual letters, or letters that the way they are drafted is quite important. So again, I can create templates where I can have my letter template drafted by my legal team, by my contract team, and then for the project team members to only fill the gaps when issuing those letters. Not only just protect your interest, but ensure that you are submitting letters that are important if there's a dispute or a claim at the end of the project that can be of use. Again, checklist is a way that we translate our knowledge and experience into actions. So instead of just depending on subjective reviews of a schedule or subjective review of a claim or whatever, by having detailed checklists that details not only our experience, but our contract requirements, ensure that the review is complete and adheres to all the requirements of the contract as well as the best practices. Even templates for what we are for managing a project, like a project charter, the project management, the communication plan, among others. Templates for quality performance index. So what I'm trying to show you over here, that virtually all the templates that today you are doing in Excel or Word, etc., you need to consider about digitizing those templates. The next step is what we call digitalizing your templates. And digitalizing your templates is about defining who will be involved in defining those processes. An individual could be playing multiple roles or could be playing a single role. There's a sequence for performing those tasks. There are conditions, there are authority approval levels. There are rules for returning a process, resubmitting, actions authorized to each individual. All these items need to be defined when you are defining your workflows to ensure that for every single business process, the right project team members, individuals are being involved in the process. As we mentioned, having the right conditions or rules is quite important in building every single rule. Trust me when I say that today we have started seeing project team members or individuals being accused by fraud when they violate what they have been assigned to review and approve, especially when they do it for their own interest. And again, by having those conditions, then we can define how they could affect my workflow. And this will help me to view the workflow and ensure how it will sequence or how it works when it gets assigned to my business process. I can also define alerts, which can be shared by senior management or stakeholders if somebody is delaying a workflow task. So I can be alerted before it's too late, so we can at least take an action. Digital signature becoming a requirement. So if you have digital signature, you can integrate with assigning your right workflow for each process is important. Notifying your team members of workflow actions also important, either by email or online. And finally, the ability to delegate and replace your workflow task if you are being on vacation or being removed from the project or whatever reason, you must need to do that. Now, as we mentioned, the third element of digitalizing your business processes is your documents. So I need to be able to upload all my documents, have my filing system aligned with my physical filing structure, upload the documents, attach those documents, define the attributes for the documents, set permission rights on who can access every folder or subfolder of my project, set alerts so I can be alerted if somebody upload a new document, download document, upload a new version. I need to be proactive. This is the whole key. You need to be proactive, be notified, and not wait for someone to notify that this action was done. And again, this will help me to review those documents, put my remarks, put my notes, and then attach them to my transactions. And of course, we're not talking about documents. We're also talking about emails, other type of records. So whenever you submit a business process, you need to be able to have all the supported documents attached to that template. Data security is important because when you start thinking about the volume of information that you are capturing, you start worry about who can access this data, what are the restrictions, what are the limitations. So again, data security is very important. Data security is not project specific. It needs to be business process specific and even fields within each business process. And this will help you to ensure that the users that you have defined have the right access to the process that's been assigned for them to perform. Again, I can even be more restrictive by having what we call conditional security, by restricting even users when certain fields exist in a record or a business process. So you have to think about all the possible items to eliminate the personal judgment on whether I need to be involved in this workflow or not, or whether I need to be involved in performing this task or not. And again, Audit Trail help us to, as admin, to monitor all logins to the system, see who is using system more than the others, who is not, and Audit Trail of all the activities that have been carried on the project. Now let me put this as an example, which is the interim progress invoice, which is a must on every single project, especially that today we find many organizations are adopting the concept of no contract, no pay, which means that every single progress invoice or every single payment you do on a project must be associated with a contract. So this means that I need to capture every single contract that you have that I have in the project, whether this is a purchase order, a subcontract, an EPC contract, even internal company contract must be managed. So every single contract needs to be captured. And this will enable me not only to capture all the revisions, all the change of the contract, but also capture all the interim progress invoices for work in place that to be informed. So I have my progress invoice template where I can go and input my work in place based on the approved progress % complete for each line item. And when this is done, I can also have what data to be shown, so I can customize my progress invoice in the format that I want. I can attach all supportive documents, which usually need to be attached to my progress invoice. I can even put a checklist, which is again very common to many progress invoices, to verify that those were done. So I might say that, I have my insurance valid, I've paid my subcontractors, I've paid my employees. All these items that we put to verify that your progress invoice is valid need to be added to progress invoice. And then you can put it in a workflow that's already been predefined for the progress invoice, and the workflow will have all the authority approval levels and will go in the cycle or the sequence of tasks that was agreed early on how it should be done. So after being submitted, it will go and be reviewed and approved by the right team members. And then I can see all my progress invoices in one single place. Now, why this is also quite important? And it's just a sample of even the progress invoice, which you can design the output template to be in the format that you want. So I can design my progress invoice to have a cover page, to have a detail of all items. And again, this is all being captured from the data that you have just fed. I can have a log of all progress invoice issued today, showing the history of every single item. I can even incorporate my progress invoices in a report that will show me for every single project, all the contracts that have been awarded, what were the original contract details, what change orders been issued on this contract, and what progress invoices been issued to date on each contract. And if I combine the actual cost or the progress invoice the data from the progress invoice with my project budget, with my commitment, then I can have the overall project financial report. Now over here, I have to pause for a second and just mention something very important, which is very common again for the construction industry. As you all know that when it comes to calculating the actual cost at the end of each progress period, one of the major nightmares that faces every project owner is what is your true actual cost? Because your true actual cost is not only the approved progress invoices. This is one part. It also includes all progress invoices that have been submitted, but not yet approved, which we call accrual. So again, today we have to go and create a process called accrual to capture all the progress invoices that although been submitted, but not yet approved. But that's not all. How about the work in place that's been approved by your team, but not yet invoiced? This again, actual cost, represent actual cost for the period. So again, I can capture this data, which is usually captured in a process called the joint management report, which is done on a weekly basis to capture all the work in place that's been accepted by your project team, but not yet invoiced. Plus all miscellaneous invoices that could carry actual cost as well as actual costs from timesheets. This means that your actual cost that you want to use to report your project financial report or you do your earned value report is a true actual cost report, not a wrong actual cost report. And this is quite major, especially if you are doing earned value reporting. Again, if you are an organization with more than one project to manage, instead of like spending days and nights and trying to put all in one single report, then I can have one single report automatically generated, summarizing all my projects, grouped by programs, showing me a report that to see. Of course, when you have this data, it's not only about tabular data, I can show it also in graphical data that some stakeholders might be interested to have, as well as this cost data can be part of your project dashboard that includes other data that maybe include data on quality, risk, safety, etc., as well as a consolidated dashboard for all your projects. So you can see that for the digitalizing the processes, we started from the template that we are all common, but then you can see the wealth of information that we have. And this final report is what we call the workflow report, which shows for every single process, business process managed on your project, what are the workflow tasks, who is delaying what are the status. So again, this automatically generated from your workflows to give you all this information. Now, the great value is not what I've showed you until now. The great value is that by having by digitalizing your project management processes, you start now having the big data that can move you to a different level of better visualization, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. Because as you know, you cannot take advantage of all these new trends without trustworthy data. So by having this trustworthy data, I can analyze my business processes. I can better understand, for example, like request for information, why we have requests for information on our project, why we have on some projects RFIs or technical queries that exceeds those of other projects. By having this information with you, you can do better analysis. You can analyze this data, you can drill in, you can have the insight to draw some kind of knowledge that's good for you. Again, you can go and have more tab of interactive progress reports that can add all this information that are more likely, better used or better shared with senior stakeholders. That can be even at enterprise level. I can associate this data not only with maps, I can associate this data with my BIM model. And the beauty of doing it, because as you know, whenever you create a BIM model, you have the BIM object. So if I associate my BIM object with my project schedule activity, which is again aggregated by my WBS, my CBS, then you have that integration automatically created, and then I can have an overall understanding of how every single transaction, my project, can be visualized on my BIM model. And also this data can help me to use logarithms for machine learning, like this correlation report would help me to understand if there's any correlation between, let's say, RFIs and change orders by NCR and delay claims. You know, we don't know, but when you run those logarithms on hundreds of millions of data, it can help you to better visualize those items. Not only that, it can help you also to define if there are any variances, any outliers among others. So I know that maybe I've moved quick into the business, into my presentation, but I did that intentionally. And the reason I would like to give you more time for your question and answers, if you would like me to clarify on what I have presented today in the presentation. And I would leave the ground for any questions that you'd like me to answer.
Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Bassam, for your informative presentation. So we have a Q&A. So if you have some questions, clarifications, so can you raise your hands or unmute yourself? And by the way, yes, I shared also the link in our chat box regarding for your certificate of attendance. Please fill up the form in order to receive your certificate of attendance. Okay, any question?
Yes, I've got one here.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Bassam, for this very informative presentation. I would like to ask if this, let's say, dashboard could be incorporated into, if you are aware of, I'm sure, is a Power BI program.
Well, actually, all those are Power BI. Yeah, this actually all are done in Power BI.
I got you, okay. And I have another question for my colleague here, Fahad. Go ahead, Fahad, please.
So maybe it might be a just general question. I was sitting next to my colleague and you mentioned this about something about machine learning. And I came from a background of programming and machine learning. I'm heavily involved in it in other design projects. And I'm kind of wondering, like, how can we use machine learning? Is a very powerful idea that recently come up, and how can we incorporate these newly techniques into project management to digitalize and make tasks fully automated?
Well, thank you for the question. Well, there's, you know, in machine learning, there are different type of logarithm, different type of approaches, among others. One of those in machine learning, one of the requirements is what we call the correlation analysis, where actually you are trying to identify if there's any correlation between different actions or different business processes in the project. So for example, like what I'm showing over here, if I take all my data, I might find out there's a correlation between RFIs and change orders, which means that if in a project we have a growing trend in issuing RFIs, then this project could be also having a growing trend in raising change orders and claims. Okay. Now, the same thing could be raised on other items. So you might find that on a project that you have a high volume of what we call it early warning notifications or potential claim or potential changes, it has major impact on the quality of the risk register. So this one art of machine learning. The other type of machine learning, which is also, we call it forced machine learning, where actually you start getting expert in analyzing those items and capturing the information. So we have found certain clients today, they start creating the culture of raising questions and answers. So they want to capture every single query that comes from the project team into a formal process and also respond back the answer. And this gets automatically populated in a single database of Q&A. So the whole point about machine learning is machine learning, as you know, is all about learning from what you have done or telling it what to learn. But you need to have the data. So it all depends on the quality of data that you have to learn. And this really the big challenge today we find with all our clients, that they want to jump on AI and machine learning. But when we ask them the very simple question, do you have your data captured? They answer no. I mean, let me maybe give you one simple example, okay? Material price. If you don't capture the price of material from every single contract, and if the material, there's no standard code for the material type, how can you track the purchase history of any material? How can you track what was the price of this material over the years, whether this price was escalating up and down, whether it's true or not, among others. So you need first to standardize your data, and second, you need to have good volume of data to make proper machine learning.
Thank you very much. Well, sir.
Okay, thank you. So any other question? Okay, so one more question before we give the certificate of appreciation to our technical speaker. Okay, so let me share this our certificate of appreciations to our technical speaker. In behalf of AACE Arabian Gulf sections, present this certificate of appreciation to Mr. Bassam A. Saman, PSP, EVP, and PNP, CEO and founder, Collaboration Management and Control Solution, for being a speaker of AACE Arabian Gulf section virtual technical webinar presentation entitled Digitalizing the Project Management Businesses Processes for Capital Projects, given this 10th of November 2021, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, signed by the President, Mr. Ghassan Hamad Al-Dusari. So thank you very much, Mr. Bassam, for your
Thank you very much.
very informative presentation.